rejection, burnout, grieving projects that never go anywhere, you know, all those good things. Hi everyone, I'm Deanna and I'm trying to scribble my way to becoming a traditionally published author. If you're wondering why I'm filming in bed, it's because I'm a chronically ill person and I'm currently going through, indeed, a flare-up of my chronic illness. I've basically not been feeling super great the last couple of days, but there's also no guarantee that I'm going to feel better anytime soon, and I still wanted to keep up with video stuff, and I thought, I'll just film this and call it a bed chat, because let's be honest, there's probably going to be more of these in future. That's just how it's likely to go. And I thought, since I am in bed and in kind of a more, I guess, vulnerable state, what better time to talk about, like, writing insecurities, how to get through them, advice for writer motivation, that kind of thing. So this is going to be about that, specifically about failure during writing and how to keep motivating yourself with multiple failures and rejections, because let's be honest, we all go through that as writers. It's literally part of the gig unless you're one of the very, very lucky 1%. I think for me, the first time I grasped how connected writing was to my self-worth and how unhealthy that was, and like the first time I really understood the extent of the impact it could have on me, was when I started querying my novel, and instead of feeling happy that I had achieved this milestone, I kind of felt nothing. This might also have something to do with my ADHD though. I think from what I've heard of other people too, it's quite common for people with ADHD to achieve a goal and not feel any sense of accomplishment because you're not getting that dopamine, and instead you just kind of feel like relief that it's done and you're kind of like ready to move on to the next thing and do the next thing. So when I finished my book, for what I thought felt like it was finished enough to be queried, I definitely got that sense of like, I don't really feel any sense of accomplishment. All I'm really doing is thinking about next steps and like how the next stage is probably going to be so full of failure and rejection. How am I going to get through that? And thinking about the negative future almost, instead of celebrating the achievement that I'd just gotten to in the present. And one of the concepts that helped me once I kind of found out about it in regards to this feeling, because you can get it about anything, like any achievement you have, right, is arrival fallacy. So arrival fallacy is the idea that loads of people think or anticipate that when they reach a goal, their whole life will change. Like everything will feel different, you'll become happy forever, kind of like a happily ever after sort of thing, or like every aspect of your life will shift around that one thing that you finally achieved, whatever it is, buying a house, having a child, getting a promotion, like it could be anything, right? And the fallacy part is obviously that that's not how anything works. The saying, wherever you go, there you are, or like you can't outrun yourself, that's basically what happened to me and what happens to everyone in that situation. Like, you finally achieve the thing that you wanted to achieve, but you don't change. Not in that instant anyway, change isn't instantaneous for human beings, it takes a long time. So you're left with this feeling of emptiness because you're like, well, I thought this was it, I finally did the thing that I had been trying to do, but it doesn't feel different, or it doesn't feel different enough, or it doesn't feel like your life has actually changed that much, because again, change is incremental unless you become an overnight success, which some people definitely do, don't get me wrong, but like the likelihood of that is much lower than actually just feeling like, oh, well, I did the thing, now what? And it takes a long time to like overcome that feeling or accept it. Like for me, what helped once I realized that actually I'd achieved the thing I've always wanted to do, which is finish my book and start querying it, was kind of being like, well, actually, if I want my life to change, I have to change it in other ways, in like small ways, every day, incrementally, which is much less exciting than being like, oh, I'm just gonna write a book and everything will change overnight. You kind of have to figure out what did you want from the achievement. So what did I want from like finishing the book? I wanted to feel like a real author, whatever that means. I wanted to get acknowledgement from other people that I was a real author. I wanted to, start my career. And you kind of have to go through each reason that you did that thing and think, well, how do I get that elsewhere? Or how would I achieve that without this thing in incremental ways in my day to day life, in ways that are practicable? So, the whole wanting to feel like a real author thing, for me, that was obviously like a self esteem issue. Like, I was already writing. I was already a writer. I had already been writing my whole life before then. Why was I not allowing myself to think of myself as a writer until I did XYZ, when if you write, you're a writer? Does that make sense? So that was like more of a mindset shift. The second one was harder, the whole thing about wanting other people to acknowledge my work and like feel like other people also saw the value in it and not just me. Again, though, this was just a mindset shift. The thing that I found for myself, and hopefully this might trigger some thoughts for you too if you're feeling similarly stuck in that mindset, was why did I actually want people to acknowledge my writing? Like, what was it that I was so desperately after? Why was I chasing agents' approval? Like, obviously, yes, I wanted them to approve of my book so they'd take me on as a client, I could be published, the literal reason. But psychologically, why did I so badly need that? I could go any other publishing route. I could never publish my books, I could just write them and be happy about the fact that I wrote them. Why was this step so important to me? And I realized I was chasing the feeling of having people that I thought were like experts, basically, or like people who knew what they were talking about, right, acknowledging my work. And obviously, I could have gotten that if I had editor friends or something like that, but I don't. So agents was like what was available to me as someone who was in the industry, someone who, in my eyes, had more authority, basically. So basically, to boil it down, what I wanted was for someone who I deemed important to acknowledge that I did a good job. I was like, well, what does that mean? What does someone important mean? There's important people in my life who have read my book, so it's not that kind of importance, right? And that also tied into, for me, the feeling of wanting to be understood, which I've always had this desire, because as a neurodivergent woman, like as a neurodivergent child who was undiagnosed, I always felt on the outside of things, and I mean, I still feel that way to an extent. It's definitely gotten better. So it was those two kind of things working together to make me really desperate for like approval from what I saw as like an expert source or a important source. And the thing that helped me in the end was realizing that this is like gonna sound kind of crazy probably, but I realized that someone important already understood my work and appreciated it. And that person was me. like like for real though, even if no one else on this planet could read what I had written and understand what I was getting at and understand the feelings behind it and the intent behind it and the messages of it, that's not important, because I understood it. And for me to be like, oh, an important person, I'm important and I'm a person. And that, I think that's the part that I was so stuck on, was because I always felt so different from other people, it felt like, oh, but I need another human to get it, for me to feel like I'm a human, for me to feel like I'm intelligible. But I am a person. I'm just a person. I'm just a guy. I'm just a girl, I'm just another human being. So, and I understood what I meant. And even if no one else did, that still means that it is a valid human feeling and a valid human perspective that I've written, because it's my own, obviously planted into characters and situations that are fantastical. Anyway, all this to say, if you're feeling this kind of desperation about publishing or external writing acknowledgement, really ask yourself, like, what is it that you're trying to get out of that achievement? So you're not stuck in the arrival fallacy of thinking, oh, once I achieve it, everything will be great and perfect, everything will be fixed. Because, you know, obviously it won't, and you'll need to drill down into what were the actual reasons for you chasing that achievement, and what were you expecting to get out of it, and how can you actually get that from other things in your life, or incrementally improve your life in ways that allow you to feel those things without the need to chase that validation in writing. And the other kind of aspect that ties into actually both writing and, ironically, my health, since that's acting up, seems appropriate. If you have any kind of chronic illness, disability, you know, neurodivergence, anything in your makeup as a person that you feel makes it difficult for you to write, to stay motivated, to function, and therefore, by affecting your functioning, impacting your ability to write, this one's for you, because I'm exactly the same way. But when I kind of got my diagnosis, finally, I was diagnosed officially with endometriosis just over a year ago, even though I'd had the symptoms for ages, and I have various other health conditions as well that are kind of tied in. But anyway, the thing that I struggled with a lot is maybe again something you can relate to, which is non-finite grief. And that's the idea that when you're grieving basically a potential future that has not come to pass or may never come to pass. And that's obviously relevant to writing as well, because I think that as writers, especially when you're like putting your work out there or trying to put your work out there, whether that's self-publishing, traditional publishing, whatever it is, you are basically in a constant grief process for how you thought a project would go and how it actually goes. And even if you're not putting things out there, I would argue, like, you might have this idea, like, of writing a book in, you know, a month and, like, getting it out in 3 months, and, you know, and then it doesn't go that way and it's much slower than you thought, or, like, life gets in the way and you have to slow down. So then you're grieving, like, what you thought, how quickly you thought you could get through that book and how you thought that you'd be able to, you know, share it with people faster. Or, you know, you get really excited about a novel or a piece of writing and you start writing it and you think it's going to be amazing, and it actually, you just never finish it because it's actually much more complicated than you thought, or the idea doesn't work how you thought, and now you're grieving that project in the sense that, you know, it never actually came to be finished and shared with anyone. Similarly, in any kind of publishing, you know, you might be grieving how readers have responded to your work and how it hasn't really found its audience yet, or, you know, maybe you're afraid that it never will. Maybe you're grieving the fact that you had to shelve a book after querying, which is what I mean, I think I've mostly come through that grief now. I kind of started early, even though technically I'm still waiting for responses. I'm a bit like, okay, this is probably dead in the trenches. You know, that's definitely a grieving process, the sense that, like, you know, this book might never be published, or, you know, not for now anyway. You have to kind of put it aside and move on to a different project. So in that sense, I think it made the past year for me personally especially difficult, because I got made redundant at work. Like, literally the day after that, I got rejected on my full for my manuscript that I really thought was going to go somewhere, and it didn't. And then I was also dealing with this new chronic illness diagnosis, so I basically had a massive overhaul in both my writing and my personal life, where I had to face the fact that the future that I thought was coming, you know, me hopefully getting an agent, maybe, you know, crossing my fingers for a publishing deal, having this job, having, you know, any kind of normal life in terms of my health, that all kind of got washed away within the span of about 6 months. And yeah, so I found this concept of non-finite grief really, really helpful. And, you know, maybe you will as well if you haven't heard that term before, or if you had that feeling and didn't have a name to it. Sometimes that helps. It certainly helped me to finally be like, oh, okay, now I understand what I'm feeling. It's a common thing. And obviously it's common for everyone. I'm just applying it to writing and to my own situation. Obviously, people feel this all the time. Like, that's kind of what a midlife crisis is, really, is people reevaluating, like, did I achieve what I wanted to in my life? And if they haven't, maybe they start to feel this kind of panic and desire to try and catch up almost. But yeah, just even knowing that concept helped, and also I think identifying it as grief, like allowing yourself the seriousness of that word to be like, no, like this isn't. Because a lot of the time I felt honestly ridiculous about how sad I was about how my book was doing with agents, and you know, how I got so close so many times and then didn't quite get it. And that felt so crushing. And I even said repeatedly to everyone around me, like, I feel ridiculous. Like, I don't understand why I'm so upset. But like, it really is grief, because you have this idea in your head of what's going to happen, and like this hope, no matter how much you try to squash it. And I did try to squash it, honestly, because I'm very much the kind of person who's like, I try not to hope, because hope like kills you. It does a little bit, doesn't it? But it's also like important to have it, otherwise how do you keep going? No matter how much you try to like hold off on it and tell yourself to be realistic, of course you're going to have ideas about how things are going to work, and you're going to have hopes and dreams, and of course those things are going to be squashed, and it's going to feel difficult if those things don't happen. And I think naming it grief and accepting the fact that you are grieving a version of your future that is now out of your reach, can help you feel like, you know, this is a valid emotion. You're allowed to feel this way, and you're allowed to take time and go through, you know, the appropriate grieving stages, whatever that looks like for you, to like come out on the other side and give yourself some grace for the fact that you've lost a version of the future. And it might not have felt real to anyone else, but it felt real to you. So that's a real loss. So I think that is very much applicable to writing, and learning to kind of ride with those emotions and allow them to happen, but try to not let them derail you and make you completely hopeless and make you give up, is like an important skill that honestly just develops through practice. And that's why everyone always says, you know, rejection is part of the deal, because you really do have to just tough it out and like learn to just take the beating, unfortunately, over and over and over again. And I wish I could say it gets easier. I mean, you know what? I will say, I think at this point I've been rejected over 150 times, because I went kind of crazy with where I sent my queries. I'll explain it in my query video whenever that comes out, probably March, when the querying is done. But you really do get to a point where it's like you hit a certain number, and I can't tell you what that number is. I'm sure it's different for everyone. For me, it was probably, I think it was after the 100 mark, where it stops meaning anything. It's like, yeah, no, that's the default. The baseline is you get rejected or you get ghosted. Really, that's the baseline, because I think that happens more commonly than actually getting a rejection email. And at that point, there's no point counting anymore. It's like you've reached a level. For me, it was reaching a level of rejection that I thought I never would be able to survive, or I never could reach, either because I thought I was going to be so amazing, or because I just thought I could never actually put myself out there enough to reach that level. But you do, and then you get through it, and you're still alive. You get that 100th or whatever rejection it is for you, and you go, oh, well, I haven't died from emotional distress like I thought I would. I haven't crumbled into a puddle of tears and like passed away. So fuck it, we ball, I guess. Like, that is genuinely how I kind of got through it. And I think that's kind of how you start approaching things the more you practice it, right? I'm hoping that next time that I have to grieve a possible future, whether that's writing or in my life or whatever it is, that it's a little bit easier, because I've done it now, and I know what the process is, and I know that I'll survive it, and I'll have a different future. Maybe a better one, who knows? So yeah, that's, I guess, my advice is let yourself feel your feelings, but also know that this probably isn't the last time you're gonna have to go through it. But you have gone through it. You're still here. Even if it feels like you're in a pit, you're in the pit alive. And as long as you're alive, you can come out the other side of anything. So yeah, those were my, I was gonna say bed thoughts, but that really doesn't sound. Those were my rest day thoughts, my mental health and motivation tips for writers for today. Thanks so much for watching. This is a bit random, but I think, it's good to have these kinds of chats about writing where, like, there isn't really an answer, there isn't really a solution to the feelings that we often feel as, like, artists or humans in general. But sometimes it's good to share, and, if you experience something similar yourself, maybe if you are able to and want to, share in the comments how you overcame it, advice for other people. Thank you so much for watching, thank you for getting this far, and I'll see you on Thursday for the return of our regularly scheduled writing vlogs. You know why that this is why I'm doing this. It's because I'm doing this because I haven't been writing and it makes me feel adrift in the world, and now here we are. Now I'm talking about mental health issues and writing struggles because I have too much time on my hands. I'm not thinking about the magical apocalypse. I'm instead thinking about the real world, and it's bumming me out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!